You may have noticed some public works vehicles moving rocks and boulders near the Minot water treatment plant this week. Jason Sorensen tells us that's because North Dakota's Department of Water Resources did a safety assessment of river dams across the state and says the river dam near 16th Street ranks high in its likelihood of creating what's known as a roller effect.
Water comes over that coffer dam. It falls about 4 to 5, 6 feet, and it creates a roller, which is very dangerous to, human life. If someone were to fall in, that roller will basically, the way that water acts, it can trap you.
At least 6 spots are medium or high priority. Similar flood protection construction will begin near Roosevelt Elementary this summer. The state is covering 75% of the cost of the projects.